everyone, my name is Courtney and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in the month of June. So it's been a month since I filmed anything, and I think the reason why is pretty obvious. I'm in full support of the Black Lives Matter movement because it's still happening. I'm in full support of it, and I just wanted to give a little bit of time and space for those voices to come forth, but it's also to give myself time to reflect on what I'm doing and how, I can approach this better, and just like really examining my own issues and blind sides. Last year I did like these tallies of all of my different books that I had read. I categorized them by like genre and how I liked them and all of those kind of things, but I also looked at, how many queer authors I'm reading, how many people of color I'm reading, how many Black authors specifically I'm reading. And so I knew this was a problem area that I personally had to work on with my reading, because I am reading Black authors, but I knew that the amount of authors I was reading just like wasn't up to par. I just wasn't reading enough Black authors consistently throughout the year. And so I knew this coming into the year, that this was one of the areas I really need to work on, because I knew I wasn't doing a good job. But I would tell myself things like, oh, but you do read authors, you'll get to these books eventually, that kind of thing. And it's like, no, with these authors getting so few platform and voice, since the numbers for publishing Black authors is so much lower than any other category, you can't just keep pushing these books to the side. Like, that's not how we fix these problems in publishing, and it's just not a good thing to do as a person trying to learn and grow. So yeah, this month I was really addressing my own biases and how I read and what I can do to be better. So for June, I picked out a bunch of queer books that I wanted to read, but because of this whole issue and because of what I was reflecting and seeing in myself and because of what was happening in the world, I decided to pick up more than I originally intended, which I'm so happy I did, because so many of the books I ended up giving 5 stars this month. But still, in the future, I need to do a better job about this, because these issues are here in our society. They're not going away anytime soon, unfortunately. I just need to be better about how to put action to the things that I'm assessing about myself. So without further ado, let's get into this wrap up. The first 2 books I read this month were Heartstoppers Volume 1 and 2. Last month, I read Solitaire by Alice Oseman, which is her first debut novel. So in Solitaire, it follows a young girl named Tori Victoria, and in these 2 books, we follow Tori's younger brother. And so it's not really a continuation or a sequel to that book, but it does have some overlay in the characters and the plot and like what's going on. This is a few years prior to the events of Solitaire. And the reason I picked up Solitaire, even though I wasn't super interested in that one, is because I really wanted to read these 2 graphic novels, and they're so cute. I love Alice Oseman's style. I loved all the relationships and the characters and the friendships in here. But these 2 books are following Nick and Charlie as they slowly fall in love, their high school story. It's very just like slice of life, day in the life high school story. It's very, I wouldn't say simplistic, but it's just, there's not really like this big overarching plot that's going on. It's just kind of like their day-to-day lives. And I really liked both of these books. I think it's just really interesting. Alice Oseman just has this whole little world of characters that all interact and overlap together in all of her books, and it almost feels very fandom-esque. She just has her precious little baby characters. All of her books are just about them interacting with each other, and yeah, I enjoyed both of these books. I also read this month I Was Born for This by Alice Oseman, so I have read all of Alice Oseman's currently out books, and so this one is not as connected to the characters of the other Alice Oseman books. This book follows a young Muslim girl named Angel, or that's her fandom name, and it's her meeting her online friend, best friend, for the first time, and they're going to be going to this boy band concert, and Angel's favorite boy band member is a trans character. The trans boy Jimmy has a big point of view as well in this book, so it's kind of them crossing paths, meeting, becoming friends, that kind of whole thing. I don't really know how to describe this book. I felt very similarly about Solitaire as I did to this one. I found myself falling in love with it because of the characters and their relationships and interactions, but at the same time I feel like this book was really messy in some places. It needed further editing to make it like a tighter, more cohesive story. I really liked what this book was saying about the internet and fandom spaces and just like online friendships, but at the same time I did feel like there was something missing for me in this book. And again, I feel like Alice Oseman has this very fan fiction style of writing, which I don't think is a bad thing. I personally really enjoy fan fiction, but I do think of fan fiction as a genre onto itself. Fan fiction has its its own tropes and writing styles. Sometimes transitions really well into fiction, but other times does not. And I could feel that kind of strain in this book because just some of the tropes and conversations and things that were happening really worked in this book, and then other times it kind of took away from the power of this book. Cohesiveness was lost because of the style and type of story that Alice Oseman wanted to tell. And so I really enjoyed a lot of things in this, but I also just didn't like everything. And then another book I read was Hurricane Child by Kacen Callender. This is a children's middle grade type book. It's kind of in the middle. And it is about this young girl, Caroline, who lives on this Caribbean island. And a couple years ago, her mother left her and her father, and she wants to find her. At Caroline's school, a new girl shows up, and together they become friends, and they decide to go searching for Caroline's mother. All of the books I was reading for June, like I said, were queer, but Alice Oseman books always focus a lot more on friendship, so there aren't a lot of relationship dynamics. But this book has a female-female romance in it, and it has a lot of discussions about being queer and what that means, especially in Black communities, especially in non-American communities. And so I really, really enjoyed this book. It was really, really good. This is my first time reading Kacen Callender, and I can't wait to check out more of their work. I just really fell in love with the light speculative elements of this story, and I just really loved the characters and their interactions. Just everything was really, really, really good. And so I picked up another book by Kacen Callender. So this is Felix Ever After. It recently came out. I've been looking forward to this book since I knew about it, just because I love the cover, everything about it. It's beautiful. And so this book is very different than Hurricane Child. This book follows a trans Black teen in New York. He's still kind of figuring out his identity. Felix is still trying to figure out what he wants to do in life, where he wants to go, who he wants to be, kind of a thing. I love contemporary coming of age stories. Like, they just hit home for me, especially queer ones. And this book especially is all about Felix figuring out that he really is in fact worthy of love, that he deserves love, and that is just such a powerful message to have in a young adult book about a Black trans teen. And so I'm so happy that this book exists in the world for other people to read because it's so good. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. I should probably say what I gave to the rest of the books. I gave both of the Heartstopper volumes 4 stars. I'm pretty sure I gave I Was Born for This 3.5 stars or 3 stars. I gave Hurricane Child a 4 star, and then I gave Felix Ever After a 5 star. Another book I read was Real Queer America, LGBT Stories from Red States by Samantha Allen. This is a nonfiction book, which I don't read enough of, and it's all about Samantha, who is a trans lesbian, I believe. It's all about her traveling across America to these small communities of queer people, all of these small communities that exist in red states in conservative areas. And just like the stories that she tells about these people that she meets, of course sometimes they're so heartbreaking, but also there's just so much hope in this book. You know, I had heard about this book for a while and I've just wanted to read it forever, and so I'm glad that I got to do it this Pride Month. Sometimes it is really good to read nonfiction books. Highly, highly recommend this. The next book I read was The Miseducation of Cameron Post by Emily M. Danforth. I've been wanting to read this for forever because it's kind of known as like one of the pinnacle, one of the first big influential queer novels, I guess, at least in YA. This book follows the main character Cameron as she goes through her life. It follows her from a very young child right before her parents pass away through high school. What this book is really known for, of course, is its discussion of conversion therapy for queer individuals. Cameron, of course, being a lesbian in a small conservative Christian area. But the conversion therapy, while really important and a big factor of this book, only starts to happen at the 2/3 mark. Like, it happens very late into the book, so, you know, don't go thinking that it's like this whole big thing is like focused right in on that one issue, because it takes a while to get there. But yeah, I really enjoyed this book. This book has a unique writing style. It's set in the 90s. I thought the story was beautiful and well written. I really loved Cameron and her journey. You know, I can see why this is such a pinnacle of queer YA, why it became so beloved. It is a really good book. And then the next book I picked up was Pet by Akwaeke Emezi. How to describe this book? This book is set in a near-ish future where the monsters have been destroyed, and by monsters, the book means like racism, homophobia, transphobia, violence, police brutality. It exists in a world where those things are not an issue anymore. But the story, of course, follows this young girl who's discovering that the monsters do still exist, and our main character is Jam, who is a trans girl. So this book is kind of in between YA, middle grade, and children's, so it feels a little bit on the younger side for a YA book just because of the way that it talks, but some of the subject matter is definitely a little bit too old for a middle grade reader because there are talks about, or at least implied talks about, sexual assault and domestic violence. So be aware of that going in, but I absolutely love this book. The writing is so lyrical and just pulls you right in, and it's so beautiful, and I love the story of Jam, and I just love how the author talks about this subject of monsters and, I don't know, just horrible things. I don't know, the metaphor worked for me. It was great. So I ended up giving this 5 stars. I loved it so much, and I definitely recommend it. And then because I forgot again, I gave this 5 stars, and I gave this 4 stars, 4.5 stars, I believe. So pretty much everything I loved. And then the last book I have here, I have not quite finished yet, and that is The Weight of the Stars by K.A. Ancrum. I'm only halfway through with this, so I'll talk about it in July, but this was another Black author that I was reading this month, and I'm loving this. I love it so, so much. It's beautiful, lyrical. This follows a queer girl and her group of friends, and this new girl comes to town, and they're like listening to wavelengths that are coming in from space. It's just, I don't know how to describe this book. It's weird. It's slightly speculative, but mostly contemporary, and everybody's queer, and I love it so, so much. June is just always a great reading month. It always is. I should just only read queer books because it's always a great time. Okay guys, those were all the books that I read in the month of June. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see everyone later, and happy reading.